The Dukes of Dice are brought to you by Game Toppers, Sean's Court Report, and listeners like you.
Welcome to the Duchy. It's time for another episode of the Dukes of Dice podcast, a proud member of the Dice Tower Network.
Coming to you from the Duchy in the Duke City, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and the Gateway City, St. Louis, Missouri, it's the Dukes of Dice, a podcast about board card and probably not role-playing games. Today, the Dukes review Radlands from Roxley Games. Then the Dukes take a look back at their review of Alma Mater in their Dukes Double Take. And now, the Dukes of Dice.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. This is Sean.
And also Alex.
And here we are readjusting to a morning recording, Alex. I feel like my energy level is completely different than a Thursday night record, but I'm faking it. I'm faking it. How are you feeling?
So the thing is, the voice sounds the same to me, but the visual is all of Sean's hair just kind of tussled and messed about, and looks like you literally just rolled out of bed and then walked straight downstairs to the record. So,
well, we don't have the girls this weekend. The girls are with my mom. So yeah, I kind of had no responsibilities this morning other than do this stupid podcast.
Wow. Hurtful and unneeded.
No, I'm not saying you're stupid. I'm just saying the podcast is stupid.
Oh, well, hurtful to the podcast, I guess, then.
So Thursday night when we would normally record, and by the way, we'll do the episode stuff in a second. Thursday night when we would normally record, I was leaving the office with my other attorney and one of our paralegals, and we were in the elevator, and I said, I think I'm in the process of really messing up with Saturday morning Sean right now. And they're like, what? I'm like, well, I'm supposed to be recording in about an hour, and I'm putting it off. And that Saturday, Sean, boy, is he going to be annoyed. I used other words, but
Sure.
So yeah, so here we are, Saturday morning. Tons of energy.
I've got tons of energy, but I'm also an hour later than you are.
That's true. Yeah, I'd be better. I'd be better an hour from now. So anyway, this is episode 269, which we are calling Thunderdorm, and that title from Harry. Oh boy, Harry Zafariadis. Zafariadis. Sorry, Harry. Hey, is this Harry's first time naming an episode? Like being selected? No,
maybe I don't know if it's his. So the naming scoreboard is, I would say, wildly out of date.
Sure.
So hard to say, but he's certainly been in the top 6 at least before. I recognize the name enough to know that.
Yeah, no, I've seen the name. I just can't remember if we've selected one of his before. But no, this is a fantastic name suggestion here because we're talking about 2 games. We're talking about Radlands, which is the sort of post-apocalyptic Mad Max inspired setting, and there comes the Thunderdome, Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, the movie there, and then we're talking about Alma Mater, about academia, and you got dorms. You stay at dorms when you're in university. So what a fantastic combination of the two. Good job, Harry. We actually get help naming all of our episodes from our Board Game Geek Guild, which is guild number 2008. You should definitely go check it out. Oof. Yep. Because before every episode, Alex goes over there. He posts a Dukes on Deck where he brings up the games that we're going to be discussing, so you can provide some input and help us get help. I don't know, naming the episode. We've got our runners up at the end of the episode for naming this episode. I feel like I said episode a lot of times.
Yes, you have. You've said it so many times. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if you used up all of your good words fighting the good fight in court this week. But you seem plumb out of them right now, Sean.
Let me say this. So most of my hearings right now are either telephonic or they're by video, by Google Meet or by Zoom. And there was this moment in court Thursday, and it was a 1:30 hearing, and I figured we'd be there till 5:30, but we actually finished at 3:30, which was fantastic. But I could not project. So we have in my conference room where I have my client with me, we have this large screen TV, and it's got a camera and a microphone mounted on it. And I always tell my client, hey, you need to project so the microphone can pick you up. And most people have problems with that. I don't have problems projecting, but for whatever reason, I could not project. Like I could hear it, I could feel it. And the judge was like, Mr. Ramirez, I need you to speak up. I'm like, I was like, what? But for what I couldn't project, there was something weird going on. I don't know. It was fine the next day, back in court the next day, back in video court the next day, and I was fine. But for whatever reason, I could not project my voice, and it was the weirdest thing.
Okay.
Not an interesting thing, just a weird thing.
No, it sounds like some sort of weird sonic sabotage from opposing counsel. And that was Sean's court report.
Well, Alex, how are you doing?
I'm fine. This was the first week of Ruby Daycare, which you were asking me before we jumped on. How was that? And in terms of the, I guess, emotional piece of this, a little bit easier because she had been in the fantastic care of my folks for the weeks kind of leading up to that. So we had some amount of she's not in the house, she's not around us, she's being cared for by someone during the day kind of thing. Now, daycare's slightly different. It's strangers, it's folks you don't know. The big trick with this, Sean, is for whatever reason, when they were entering our email address into the system, I'm not going to read it off air, but basically it has Goldsmith in part of the email, and they put a random K in the middle of Goldsmith when they were typing in the email address.
Okay.
So I haven't been able to get signed up for the app that they use to notify you on daily updates and how's she doing and how her supplies and da-da-da-da. And I haven't been able to get anything for the parent portal so we can, pay them. They haven't been upset about that. They've taken great care of her over the course of the week. They've been really friendly, but those kind of being in the dark pieces have been trickier. So we're getting into a routine. We're getting a sense of things. But that one specific piece of things was made it just a little bit iffy. But otherwise, she seemed to be perfectly happy. She was nonplussed by the whole thing and has been sleeping great, about 7 to 7 most nights, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. That was overnight, and that is pretty typical for her these days.
We should all be so lucky.
Yeah, I don't know. She's a good baby. I like Ruby. Ruby
I just
a
meant,
lot.
Well, that's good. I would hope that you would. I have these strange feelings for my daughter. Is this weird? What's up with that?
Like love? Yeah. No, I know what you're referring to now. Okay. Well, anyway.
Wait, what? What was I referring to?
Well, to other people sleeping well.
Oh, yeah. That's what I meant.
Yeah, I know. Now
I would love to sleep from 7 to 7 every night. That sounds wonderful.
Well, I don't know. I like hanging out late at night. It's fine. Okay. Anyway, this is allegedly a board game related podcast. And Sean, this is a rare week where I am short a new play for various circumstances. So you gotta carry the load this time around. What's a new thing you've been playing?
Alex, I'm happy to carry your load. So I played 1848, which is an 18XX game, it's actually 1848 Australia. So it's helpful to add in some sort of descriptor because in an 18XX, you're like, and I have this problem too. I'm like, okay, hey, we just played 1832. Hey, we just played 1865. I'm just like, wait, I don't remember which one. Was that the one with the companies that there's 3 different types, or is that the one with companies where there's 2 different types? Anyway, Australia helps. So this is an 18XX where you are investing in these train companies. You are buying shares, other people are buying shares of your company, and then you are laying out these railways and trying to, it's not really pick up and deliver, you're trying to make connections, and then based on the size of trains, the distance the trains can go determines how much revenue you make, and you decide whether to pay out that revenue to shareholders or to withhold that money so that you can buy new trains. And then there are these rotating operating rounds and then stock rounds. 18XX, pretty simple. How is this different than other 18XX games? Well, Alex, did you know that in Australia, back in the mid-1800s, they had different gauges for their railways? In other words, like different widths, more or less, or different widths of distance of the rails, or the width of the individual rail?
I didn't know that, though. I will say I went and looked up the BGG entry for 1848 Australia.
Looks great, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, any 18XX game kind of has this same sort of look in my book. But the sort of the almost like the movie poster line for this that you have on the top of BGG reads, "One continent, 6 states, 3 gauges, and a British bank. What could go wrong?"
That's good. That's good stuff. And that's a great description
of it. No, it's not. What?
Well, no, it's interesting because you have these different gauges, when you cross these state boundaries, you have to account for the difference in gauges. And it might mean an extra stop. And basically, it's an extra stop that reduces your revenue. Or you can get these plus trains, which can ignore a single gauge change, which is pretty interesting. The other thing that's interesting is the Bank of England's involved, that pesky Bank of England, and you're able to take loans from the Bank of England. You don't pay the loan back necessarily. You just lose stock value. The share price of your company goes down significantly. But you're going to have to take loans throughout the game. And it's a bit of a balancing act, because if I see everyone else is taking a couple loans, well, I could probably take a couple loans too. But you can also invest in the Bank of England. And early in the game, the Bank of England shares are very cheap, because it's going to go up as more people take loans. But the nice thing is, every operating round, the Bank of England pays out dividends. And what can happen is, if this is really exciting, Alex, you're going to love this. If your company's share price drops too low, and this may be from one of the things that happens in 18xx games is, as more new advanced trains come out, they quote unquote rust or destroy older trains. They have no value and they just go away. And so you have to have a train for each company you have at the end of that that company's operating route. And if you don't, then you have to do a forced train purchase. And in this case, you have to take enough loans from the Bank of England to buy a train. But if each time you take that loan, it's going to drop the share price. And if it drops it below a certain value, that company is said to be in receivership. Receivership, Alex. Calm down, Alex. And then basically you've lost the company. Hopefully there's enough money left in the company to pay out the other shareholders, but the director doesn't get anything, and they lose their shares. And there's also this thing called certificate limit, which is how many shares you can have total. And so when a company goes into receivership, everyone's share limit or certificate limit goes down by 2, but the director who failed that company, their limit goes down by 4, which is huge, which is totally huge. And at that point, if you have shares in the Bank of England, you're getting paid out in the operating round also for the different stations that failed company had, because the bank took it over, basically. Very interesting stuff here. I would also say one of the quicker 18xx games, and although all of that may have sounded very complicated in a lot of ways, this is one of the simpler 18xx games. I know I understand, but
yeah. Sean, there's
when
6 states, 3 gauges, and a British bank. What could go wrong?
You were making faces, which is why I said I understand. I understand, because you're like, that's not simple. It's one of these. I think it's one of the simpler ones, and it was kind of a nice change of pace, because we've been playing the last 2 or 3 18xx games we played were super complicated with all these different types of businesses, and they operate in different ways, and they have different, like, this type of business you can own 50-50. This type of business you can own like 40-60. This type of business you can own. I enjoyed them. This one was very refreshing. It was very different. It was very weird. I almost think this might be a good, except for the gauge change. Gauge change is annoying. The gauge change was kind of punishing. But I like this quite a bit. And I think it was solid. I came in second. I came in a very close second, despite me being the only person whose company went into receivership. One of my companies went to receivership. Yeah. Yeah, it was rough, but it was still close. And again, I came in a close second. So, but that was fun. 1848 from GMT. I really like GMT's production. A lot of 18xx games, they're either like a glorified print and play, or you have to like cut them out yourself. And but GMT does a good production. I know you would probably differ from that, but that's okay, Alex. It's a fine production.
Okay, sure, huh? All right. Well, I'm not gonna play that. At some point here, Sean, I will make this commitment. at some point, perhaps the next time I'm able to make it to a Sean Con,
Mm-hmm.
if you can identify an 18xx game that you think would be a good entry point,
1846.
I'm willing to play it. I am willing to play an 18xx game because, in fairness, I have played some of these longer, involved economic games. What was it? Indonesia, I think was one that I've enjoyed. I've enjoyed the experience. It's just so hard to get in for me. Like the teach has to be right, and the place has to be right, or else as you know, I am a lot better in a lot of ways when it comes to learning games and not being the princess and the pea, as you so fondly like to call me. But something that looks like that specific game looks is hard for me to get as immersed in. So, anyway. Cool.
Understandably.
Well, Sean, I played a game by a designer with a game that is all over the hotness. But I didn't play the specific game in question. You did, perhaps, and you may hear about that in a future episode. But I played a game from Paolo Mori called Blitzkrieg, World War II in 20 Minutes. This one published by PSC Games. Sean, have you played or seen this one at all?
I've seen it. I haven't played it, and I wasn't super interested in the look of it.
No, I can't imagine you would like this.
But I knew it was Paolo Mori, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. Then I saw it, and I was like, eh.
It's a selling point on a game that I don't think you need as a selling point. So it is literally called Blitzkrieg, World War II in 20 Minutes, and it tries to live up to that 20-minute piece of things. What you have is you have a very abstracted out version of the various theaters of combat that you would have seen during World War II. So you have Western Europe, Eastern Europe. You have basically the whole globe is kind of laid out. And one of you is the Axis, one of you are the Allies. And how this is going to work is you are going to have 3 squares in reserve that you can play. And they're basically either tanks for land units, they're boats for sea units, and then they're planes, which can be played everywhere. The units themselves have a strength value, and then each of the locations has multiple lines that represent battles. So the top line of a battle might have 3 spaces to deploy on. Each space can either be land, sea, I should say, or a mix. And the spaces will oftentimes have some sort of special placement ability. For instance, the bombing token, which allows me to remove one of your units from reserve, or research, which allows me to grab at random a specific, more powerful square and throw it in my bag to potentially draw later. When you play these, the unit power will move a kind of tug-of-war track one way or the other. And when a full line is filled out, the battle resolves. Whoever is leading in that theater will immediately score victory points. Your objective in the game is to get to 25 victory points before your opponent does. You'll draw another tile at the end of your turn. Your opponent takes their turn, and then it's back to you. So you're sort of playing tug-of-war in different spaces, trying to set things up to, ultimately hit that victory point threshold. If you let one theater get too out of control, all of the battles get closed out, and your opponent gets all of the points associated with the remaining battles, which can be a pretty sizable chunk of things. It's, again, very abstracted out. It's a tug-of-war game, effectively. But it has the token abilities and the space abilities lead to some really interesting decision points. It lives up to the billing on the box of being a war game played in 20 minutes that has that sort of World War II feel. So the setup is relatively fast. The play is very smooth, and there's some really interesting, crunchy decisions. I went too all in on research in this game and got swamped over by my opponent, Patrick, who just kept winning theaters and eventually got far enough ahead that I couldn't catch up when things were really on the line. I let stuff get out of hand, Sean. So I don't know. I don't think you'd hate it, but I think because you play so many more complex war games and you like a deeper experience in that space, I could imagine that this might come off as too simple or wouldn't be robust enough for you. But it's a small time investment. So if you see it and you have a spare 20, 30 minutes or something in between larger games or at the end of a night, it wouldn't be a bad one to try out for you, Sean.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think it's available at Empire. I mean, it's probably not something I'm going to seek out, to purchase. But I mean, don't get me wrong. I'd certainly give it a play. It just wasn't something I'm like, oh yeah, I need to get my hands on it.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think I'm 50-50 on where you would wind up on this game.
Sure.
I don't think there's something so staggeringly over the top, oh my goodness, brilliant about it that you would want to own it and have to have it. But I think there is a chance you would like it and find the streamlined nature of it at least interesting.
Sure.
But maybe too simple for your taste.
For instance, we played a coin game this last Wednesday. We played Cuba Libre because we finally decided. I think we have a group. It's going to be my 18XX group, Matt, Lynn, and Rory and myself. We decided that because right now Dukes of Dice Wednesdays are every other week, and so we decided on the off Wednesdays we're going to start playing coin games. And so this was my first coin game in like 3 years. Now
wait, Sean, part of what you just said is breaking news. Did we get bumped by Rory? Were we not delivering the goods? What's going on?
No. It's just post COVID.
Okay.
So yeah, they've only been doing Dukes of Dice Wednesday every other week. I mean, at some point it's going to go full back to normal. So yeah, but no, that was just. I mean, there were no Dukes of Dice Wednesdays for quite a while.
Sure.
Let me tell you about the COVID-19 virus, Alex. I don't know if you're aware of this and lockdowns and whatnot. So anyway, that's Blitzkrieg, not Blitzkrieg Bop, just Blitzkrieg.
Nope, just Blitzkrieg. Blitzkrieg Bop, the board game. I don't know what that would be. Well, anyway, over to you, Sean, for another new play.
Yeah, new play, although old play technically. I played the second edition of Alexander Pfister's Great Western Trail. This was published by Eggert Spiel. The original was published by Stronghold, I believe. And I own the original, and I own the expansion. And I've always enjoyed Great Western Trail. It's been quite a while since I've played it, but it stayed in the collection. Despite multiple cullings, it stayed there. And despite not having played it in quite a while, because that's usually a good sign to get rid of a game in a culling, but it survived. And it's been a conscious decision. I'd say, oh, did I need to get rid of this? No, I like it quite a bit, and it's going to stay. So, yeah, we played this new second edition, and I know there were some updates, some tweaks between the first and second edition. I mean, I can't really articulate what those were. It was something where I generally remembered how to play. We had one new player at the table, so Trevor had to do a rules teach, which was good because I probably could have muddled through a round, but it was good to hear the rules. And I'm like, oh yeah. And it was all kind of coming back to me. So basically, Great Western Trail is and I'm trying to remember how we described it back in the day, because it's not a worker placement, but it's this sort of you have a little marker that's your cow person, and you are herding cattle from somewhere in the United States to Kansas City. And there's all these different routes you can take, although it's somewhat linear, but they split and they merge, and they split and they merge. And as the game progresses, you're going to be building new buildings, which are new spots for you to stop on, which will give you actions that you can take. But sometimes you'll have to pass other people's buildings. Sometimes it's free to pass those buildings. Sometimes you have to pay them money when you pass them. And then other times you say, well, I don't want to go down this route because I'm going to have to pay Rory $3. I'm going to have to pay Trevor $2. So instead, I'm going to take the back route, but you might have to go through these bandits, and you might have to go through these hazards, which might cost you money, but it's also less money than going through these other people. Plus there's the net difference and all of that. Ultimately, you're winding up in Kansas City. And when you get to Kansas City, there's some things that you're doing to kind of repopulate the board, but ultimately you're taking your hand of cows. You start with, I want to say it's 5 different kinds of cows that value from $1 to $3. And you have 2 of each color of cow, with the exception of the lowest level, the $1 cows. I believe you have 4 of them. And so ideally you're in Kansas City with all different colored cows, because you're going to get paid the face value of each color of cow, but only for that first cow. So if I show up with 4 green, that's bad. That's super bad. But if I have 1 of each color, that's fantastic. And so I'm going to get paid that amount of money. And then I am going to deliver that along this little tracker. And it goes from like there in you sell the cows in Kansas City, or at the far end, maybe you ship them all the way off to New York City, for example. And as you are shipping them to these different locations, you get these bonuses kind of the farther out you go. And there's some end game scoring. There's a lot of, I mean, this is a pretty typical Alexander Pfister Euro with, point salad, lots of different things going on here. That's just sort of the basics of it. And we reviewed this way back in the day. I'm assuming, I'm sure we did.
Oh, we absolutely did. Yeah.
Yeah. And I enjoyed it well enough. And here's what I will say. What I will say is I'm not super excited to get it back on the table anytime soon, but I don't want to get rid of my copy. At the same time, I don't want to quote unquote upgrade to second edition. I don't think there's a need for that. I think my original plus the expansion are just fine. But yeah, it was I think as good as I remembered, but I think my fondness for midweight Euros has declined quite a bit over the last couple of years. And this is a medium heavy Euro. But I think it's been affected. So I'm like, oh yeah, no, this is exactly what I remember. And I still like it, but I'm good. I'll play this again in like 4 years. So I don't know what that says. Alex, what was your recollection of Great Western Trail?
So this is, for some people, an all-time game. This is,
yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, it's in the very high end of the BGG all-time list. Let me just pull that up. Yeah, 12th all-time on the BGG list. So this is a game that's gotten a ton of love. I enjoyed this game. I think this sort of merry-go-round of visiting the West and going up and down the trail, I enjoyed quite a bit, and there's a lot of interesting decisions you can make. I'd be curious to play it again. But this was not one that was ever going to make a top games of all time for me kind of list. So more great than good, but more great than excellent, I guess, for my tastes. I know for some people this is cream of the crop. So, but that's my recollection of it. I haven't played it in quite some time at this point.
And what I will say is that this came out from Stronghold the same year that Stronghold put out Terraforming Mars. And I believe at the end of the year, I had said, yeah, Terraforming Mars is good, but I think Great Western Trail is the better game, and Great Western Trail is my preferred game. And at least for my taste, that was a hot take, because Terraforming Mars has had a lot more longevity for me. I've played it way more, and I probably enjoy it way more now than I did back when they both first came out. So just kind of interesting to see how things like that change.
4th overall on BGG. Terraforming Mars.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah.
It has had slightly better legs, but I think for Great Western Trail, any game that's in the top 15 has a passionate fan base. And you have to at that point. So both of those have really stood out. Sean, crazy to think both of those were released in 2016.
And that 2016 is 16 years ago.
What?
Sorry, 6 years ago. Jeez.
What?
Math is hard, Alex. No, here's the other thing that I think that's interesting is how does having 2 separate entries in BGG for first edition and second edition affect a game's ranking on the top 100? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
yep.
Are people going to go in and say, oh, well, I played second edition, but I want to rate it on first edition because that's the one that already has the momentum, so to speak. I'm curious. I'm looking here. Second edition, it says that it is number 551 overall.
Yeah, I mean that's just quantity at a certain point, but also some of what you're talking about splitting the votes.
Right. So that's kind of interesting.
Okay, well, I'd be curious to try it at some point, but there are so many games to try once I get back to a convention. I don't know if this will crack that main group, so to speak. But yeah, sure. There you go. Well, Sean, I've run out of useful things to contribute to this conversation. So I think that means after the break, it's time for a review. Well, Sean, the Game Toppers 3.0 Kickstarter is in the books, and thanks to a whole bunch of backers, Game Toppers had a heck of a Kickstarter campaign, more than $800,000 raised to get more Game Toppers, new features, all sorts of fun stuff headed folks' way.
Wait, did you say 800,000?
I did say that amount. Yes.
Oh my goodness. That's a ton of money.
Sean, did you make it in time? Are you part of that group?
Wait, it's over? It's over? Like over?
No, it's done. I'm sorry you missed your window. But the good news, Sean, is that if you keep an eye on the Game Toppers LLC website, the late pledge manager should be open in the near future. Take a look there, and you can still get in on all the fun, get the newest features, get yourself a Watson, or get yourself, I don't know, whatever you want. Awesome game mats, rails, something cool to really take your gaming experience to the next level without getting a fully dedicated gaming table, which is exactly what Game Toppers is all about. Check them out, GameToppersLLC.com, because if it ain't a showstopper, it ain't a Game Topper. They've taken you into the exciting world of trains. They've taken you into the thrilling world of Greek mythology. But now, Roxley is going to take you into a post-apocalyptic world where punks abound and nothing is safe. Can you survive? Can you drink enough water? We'll let you know. It's Radlands.
All right, Radlands. Oh boy, Radlands is what's this, a 2021 release?
Sean, Radlands, yeah!
Radlands, I believe, was a 2021 release from Roxley Games, designed by Daniel Pitchnick, with art by Mr. Cuddington, Damian Mamoliti, Manny Tremblay, and Roxley? Or did you just have Roxley there?
I just typed Roxley just to have it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, Roxley didn't do the art, except to the extent that they hired artists.
They paid for it. Yeah.
They paid for it, right? And that's really what's most important.
Sean, we have to credit the people who paid for the art just at the same level as the people who did the art. That's what's important here.
I'm going to go into our show notes here, and I'm just going to put publisher in there so this mistake doesn't happen again in a future show notes. Fantastic. All right. Well, this is a card game where you are basically controlling a post-apocalyptic tribe trying to protect itself, trying to get resources, and basically trying to eliminate the enemy tribe. It's a 2-player game. It's a shared deck. And basically the object here is to destroy your opponent's 3 camps. And of course, you have 3 camps of your own that you are endeavoring to protect. So at the start of the game, you're going to draw 6 cards from the camp deck and then pick 3 of them. You reveal them simultaneously, and those are your 3 camps. The 3 camps, depending on what numbers they have on them, will determine what your starting hand size is. But each of the camps also have a special ability that you'll be able to use during your turns, and I'll kind of explain that here in a minute when I talk about card effects. And then at that point, you're off to the races, so to speak. You are drawing a starting hand, and then at the start of every turn, you're going to draw a new card. You're going to have events, which I'll describe more in detail. They're going to advance, possibly resolving that turn. And then you're going to play any number of different abilities that you have the resources to basically pay for. And in that process, you are hopefully damaging your opponent's camps, or you're damaging or killing the different person cards that they've put out to protect those camps so that you can damage them in subsequent turns. All right. Now, the big resource here is water. And every turn, you're going to get 3 water. It's going to get replenished. So, for example, if you had saved up water for some reason, don't save up water. You're not going to get that as a bonus in the next turn. You always start the turn with 3 water. Although there are different ways for you to get more water through your turn. There are different card effects that you can use that might give you more water. And then you're gonna play your turn. So there are different types of actions that you can take. One thing you can do is you can play an event card. And when you play an event card, it's going to have this little icon with a bomb in it, and it's going to say either 0, 1, 2, or 3. If it's a 0, it's going to resolve immediately. And there's some sort of an effect. And generally, the higher the number, the higher the effect. But the higher the number, the higher the delay that's going to take for that event to resolve. Because if I play a 3 event, it's going to go in my 3 slot, which is at the kind of at the bottom, and then next turn it's going to advance to the 2 slot. The turn after that, the 1 slot, and then that final turn it's going to resolve because it starts there in the 1 slot. I can also play a card from my hand, and by the way, this is kind of multi-use cards. There's really only 3 uses, but that's still multi as far as I'm concerned. You can play a card to your play area. So these are going to be persons that you're playing. And for each camp, it kind of creates a lane. And in each lane, you have two slots for people that you can place there. Now, most people will have some sort of cost in water, but you can also, instead of playing the card, you can just junk it. Most cards have a junk effect. And that junk effect might be, damage a person or damage a camp. It might give you water. It might let you refresh cards, which is how you kind of heal a card once it's been damaged. So that's kind of that multi-use aspect. And there's one more multi-use, and that's basically where sometimes you'll be directed to get a punk. And a punk is basically a face-down card, and it's a person, but it's not as durable. And I'll explain that when we talk about damage here in a second. I can also, as an action, spend 2 water to draw a card. It's not super efficient, but sometimes you may need to do that. You can also take an action to take your water silo. Both you and your opponent have your own water silos. Now, this is a way where you can kind of save water. Basically, you pay 1 to take the water silo, which is always out in front of you, and you can place it in your hand. And then you say next turn, you'd probably want to do it next turn, you can junk it for an extra water. Except when you junk this card, rather than going to the shared discard pile, it's going to go back to your little play area so you can get it again later. Now, where this game really shines is all of the printed abilities on the various non-punk persons that you have out in front of you. So you could say, okay, this person here has an ability that simply says, I pay 2 water and I damage something that's unprotected. And this unprotected thing is important. I'll come back to that. So you pay the 2 water, you place that water on the card to denote that you've used its ability that turn, so you can't just use it again. I can't pay 2 water and then 2 water again to repeat it. And then I pick something to damage. When I damage something, and I'm going to turn it sideways, unless it's a punk. If you damage a punk, the punk is killed. It's removed right away. It goes back to the top of the deck because you never see what's underneath the punk. But if it's anything else, if it's a regular person or if it's a camp, you're going to turn it sideways. If it's a person that's been damaged, they can't use their abilities until they've been refreshed. A camp can still use its abilities when it's damaged. But if that camp or that person that's been damaged takes another hit, then they're gone. They're destroyed. And that's how you're going to win the game. You're going to destroy those camps. But there's a whole bunch of other abilities. It's not just damage. There's some specific damage that might only affect persons and not camps. There's an icon that initiates a raid, which is a special event card that you have that's kind of like the water tower in that it kind of sits out in front of you. The raid comes in event level 2, and when it resolves, your opponent damages a camp of their choice, which is pretty interesting. But really, this game is about finding these synergies. And so you would expect that there's a whole host of different abilities on these cards, and it's really you discovering what works well together that makes this game, enjoyable. Now, I did mention before, when you're damaging things, they need to be unprotected, and this is where that lane kind of comes in. So basically, you can't attack my camp if I have a person in front of the camp. You can't attack that person in front of the camp if there's another person in front of that person. So you kind of have to work your way down the lane. Now, Alex, your lanes and my lanes, they don't correspond with each other. In other words, your leftmost lane is not dedicated to attacking my rightmost lane. You can pick and choose. It's just there to denote that this particular camp is protected by these people or these punks or whatever. There's a lot here, but this is kind of a game where the gameplay is really found on what's on the cards. And so obviously I can't go too much more into that right now, but that's pretty much how you play the game. Alex, leave anything out?
You mentioned events, yes?
I did mention events. I
so
did.
Yeah, I think we're mostly good. I think as you mentioned, the core of the game is what's on the cards rather than the flow of it, though there's some uniqueness to the flow and what happens with this game, even from setup, which we'll discuss as we get into gameplay. No, I think we're good to go. Sean, your expectations going into this one. Did you know that this was done by someone who had done development work for Magic the Gathering?
Yes. Yeah, I had heard that. I'd seen this on Kickstarter. I almost backed this. I was very close to backing this, mostly because of the art. And I know I'll save it for the art discussion. But I was close to backing it, but I didn't see enough in the gameplay that made me want to back it. Now that's not, maybe it is. I'll leave it at that. We'll just leave it at that. Let's move. Let's go to what you think.
Okay. So I mean, visually the game drew me in from that standpoint. And anytime you have a visually interesting 2-player experience, it's going to catch my attention. I like having those kinds of games in my collection. It tends to get more use than other games. So the Magic the Gathering piece didn't necessarily draw me in or not, other than the fact that it led itself to the possibility that there would be a decent amount of depth within the game system. And so, yeah, I was optimistic that I would enjoy this game from the get-go, from the time we chose to jump in and review it. So, high expectations. Sean, rulebook. Did you learn this from the rulebook?
I did not, although I probably just should have, because there's really not much there in the rulebook. Like it's a pretty simple game. I watched the Watch It Played video, and of course Rodney did a fantastic job. But then I've since read the rulebook extensively, and it looks like a solid rulebook. Did you learn it from the rules?
I did learn it from the rules, not from a video. I could have learned it from a video, but I stuck to the rulebook, and I would say for the most part, fantastic. There is one element, and this is more in understanding or learning the game, and I'm going to pull out a reference card before I fully say this. So, I don't know. Did you find this game very learnable, Sean, while I try and make sure my critique is valid?
I think it was learnable. I mean, it does a pretty good job. And by the way, the retail version, there's, a very deluxe Kickstarter version. The retail version is like a 3x6 box. 3x6 box. And so it's got it looks more like a rules pamphlet. It's like super landscape. It gives you the overview, game turns, setup, talks about the different card types, talks about all the different iconography. I mean, it seems solid. What was your issue, Alex?
This is on the smaller side. So the game I found really easy to learn. They go through setups. It's well diagrammed. It looks nice. It's presented well, and it flows well. So all of that stuff is good. It even comes with a 2-sided player reference card.
Yep. Which
helps you out with turn sequence, what should happen. It can help you with whether a card is supposed to be ready or not. It can help you with when card traits are. It has a lot of good rules refreshers. It has a good effect icon guide. I will say the one thing is the effect icon guide, if you have that side face up, appears to be a comprehensive list of things you can do or what's in play. And there's one specific action which is maybe rare, but definitely got used in one of my plays at a decent clip, which is spend 2 water to draw a card. They have that listed on here under the actions as draw card.
Right.
But there's no indication as to cost, what that is, what that looks like, other things. Everything else, you could, play card, great, you know what the cost of a card is supposed to be. Junk card, you know what that is. You have the icon in the top corner, which is reinforced by the back. You have take water silo, that's all typed out on the card itself, pretty straightforward. Usability, that's the ability on the card. But it just says draw card. And if there was just some sort of, this is so small, but some sort of small thing indicating like 2 water droplets next to that, or some sort of water cost, I think that could have helped not lead to some confusion on that specific rule. Very small, just a nitpicky thing.
I noticed that too. Yeah, and I was like, oh, that's weird. Like that's an easy fix. But it's weird that it, yeah.
But again, one of those where the game does way more right with this than not.
Yes.
The rule book is vivid, laid out well, clear to understand. So yeah, I have very few qualms and internalize the rules of this quite well. Art and components, Sean, and I think we both cited this, and I think it's impossible not to cite. This game looks amazing. Amazing art. Really, really beautiful game.
Yeah. So what I really like, it's kind of comic book art, very bright, vibrant colors. So like the back of the main deck, you have these punks. And so again, this is sort of like a Mad Max aesthetic in terms of the imagery here. And you've got this guy, he's silhouetted, right? He's mostly black. You've got like a blue halo around him, sort of, which is like he's backlit. He's got these like goggles on. He's got this like rebreather mask with tubes coming out. He's got like a spiky shoulder and spiky hair. And then it's just this bright pink bright pink color on the back. The only, like, what's interesting to me is if I were to look at the back of the card, it seems a little bit more cyberpunk than post-apocalyptic. But that's fine. Not a big deal. As far as the cards themselves, it is also bright. Which is, I think it's just the style that they're going for. I tend to associate post-apocalyptic, that aesthetic with kind of a lot more dinginess and grays and muted browns and things like that. But they said, hey, let's go with a very vibrant color palette here, which it looks amazing. Looks amazing. I think it's fantastic. It's when you're sitting there, when your opponent's playing, you're staring at your hand, you're thinking about what you're doing, but you're also, I was examining the art and looking at it and looking at all the details, and I think it looks great.
I mean, it looks to me stunning. I love that color scheme they've gone for with the bright purples and blues, and it's just cool. Stylistically really cool. Box is slick. That outline of the punk in blue and purple kind of gives you a sense of what the rest of this is going to look like. They don't have many other components outside of the cards, right? It's just the water tokens, but those are very thick, very high quality, well done. What?
I had problems punching mine.
Oh, okay. I didn't run into that.
Yeah, to the extent that on 2 or 3 of them they ripped.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
Oof. Well, yeah. Bummer. I didn't run into that. I'll throw this out there too, Sean. I like that they have borders even on that distinguish the event cards and the people cards really, really, really cleanly, so that you know which type of card this is for gameplay purposes. The cards are well laid out. The iconography is crisp and clear, and it's just a really good-looking game. And one of those games where I don't tend to buy playmats for games. I would buy a playmat for this game to upgrade the experience.
Yeah, I think so. So, you and I both have the retail edition. I've seen in person the deluxe edition. There was a guy on Duke's night. I haven't met him fully and haven't gamed with him, but he had it one night, and this was a couple months ago, and he showed it to me and he showed it to Jeremy. Beautiful playmat. It's got the embroidered edges. There we go. And this is a game where it definitely benefits from having a playmat, so you know where the lanes are. It's clearly distinct what event level is at. I think it's helpful. It's kind of like Netrunner in a way, which I know you haven't played, Alex, but I made these Netrunner playmats when I was teaching Netrunner because I thought it was really helpful because you kind of have different lanes. Netrunner is asymmetric, and so for the corporation player, you have these different lanes, and it helps to kind of to denote that in some way. Yeah, I think the playmat's beautiful, and I wish I would have had it when playing this. Yeah. And what I will say too, Really nice linen finish, really solid card quality on the cards. And like I said, yeah, some issues with punching these. I don't know if it was just a bad die cut on mine, or if that's typical and I just got unlucky. But otherwise, I think it's a fine production overall. Yeah.
Sean, this is the key for this one, this next section. It's the key for any game, but I think especially for this one, for you, this is the area I had the most curiosity about. Gameplay.
Yeah.
So I'll go first here for a little bit and mention that this game does something that I think more games like this should do, which is that it has an element of not deck building, but strategy building. That's a really core, interesting decision for what's a short game at the top of the game. You grab your 6 camps from the deck, and you pick the combination of the 3 that you want to have drive your engine. And that's the key differentiator in this game, right? Is what is that engine doing? What are you driving it toward? And in not a ton of plays, but in enough plays, I've seen some really interesting combinations of this. And what clicked in my mind is, Sean, this was similar to a game, the first game I worked on at Gray Fox Games back in the day, Bushido, where you do a lot of the drafting and hand building and have your strategy foundationally set before you start playing. Bushido, a game I wish got more love. If only I were better at my job. Oh well. Sorry about it, Pedro. You did a great job designing it. But yeah, Bushido had an element where you drafted the hand of cards you use for the rest of the game at the top, and you could win or lose that game in the draft. I don't know if I'd go so far as to say you can win or lose Radlands in the draft. I suppose you could, but it sets up some really interesting, unique engines, and the abilities on those core camps really set the tone for the rest of the game. So I like that even that first decision, which in some games, choose which of these 2 goals you're going for, or choose, your starting hand. Those aren't substantial. This is a substantial off-the-top decision. What I do like, too, though, is the game gives you a starting set of camps so that you don't have to make that decision on your first play. You can just have those base camps and go from there. So that's something I really liked as an element of gameplay. There's going to be more I'll have to say, but Sean, I'm very curious. Was this game enough for you?
Was it enough for me? I think the answer is yes, and I think the answer is no.
Okay, well, those are 2 of the 3 possible answers, other than maybe. So I'm curious. Okay, dive in.
Yeah. So I agree with you. I do think that was the most interesting part of the game, because you're sitting there and you're saying to yourself, okay, number 1, if I pick these 3 camps, I'm only going to start with a hand of 2 cards. Whereas if I pick these 3, I might have 3, I might have 4. Oh, that's interesting. And how am I going to get, if I put these cards together, these camps together, how am I going to synergize them? Am I just looking for a good utility ability? Am I looking for a strong synergy? And then what am I prioritizing in terms of what I'm doing with the actual person event cards that I'm looking for and drawing, right? So there is you can definitely just sit down and play the game and see what happens, but there is a very deep level of strategy here. First and foremost, I acknowledge that hands down. And I think we'll see this in a later comment, but I agree with this, and I thought about this because I initially played a couple games of this with Chris, and then I played a couple games with Raquel, and there was a huge difference when I played with Raquel, because I'd already had a couple games under my belt, and because I tend to do better at these types of games than Raquel does, there was a huge differential in terms of ability. So knowledge of what's in the shared deck also came into play. You need to play this with a partner that you guys are at the same level in terms of number of plays and things like that. Um, because I think in the couple games that Raquel played, it was just, I'm playing the game as I'm going through the motions, like not in a negative way, but just because she's learning the game. Whereas I'm thinking, okay, I'm putting these particular pieces together. There's a couple of cards I'm looking for. And so, oh, good, I got the card that's going to let me draw a bunch of cards and then discard a bunch of cards so I could find those pieces that I need to get a really strong engine going. I had one combo where there's one person that says the first event that you play every turn costs or is a zero event, meaning
yes,
it resolves
just happens
immediately, right?
Oh.
And then I also had one of my camps was the one that triggers a raid. And so basically I was able to raid every turn immediately, which is your opponent chooses a camp and damages that camp. And what's interesting about the raid is a nice way to keep the game from stalemating. There's a clock, right? Because you could be like, well, as much as I can raid, I'm gonna raid, just to kind of keep the pressure on. And I think that was a brilliant design. I bet you at one point there was no raid card, and the game's just stalemated a bit and stagnated. And they're like, hey, what if we did this? I bet you that was a thing. So that was that was cool. I liked that. There's a lot to like about this game. I just don't know that it's going to have any sort of longevity with me.
Okay. Sean, I'll jump in and say, I'm not... So, typically, for two-player games, especially ones of this length, I would have played this with Abby. Mm-hmm. That would have been a typical person to play this game with. And there was something about the timing, just I think with Ruby Daycare and other things, that had her be resistant to it. And so I ended up I played this with Patrick. I had other sources of plays. I do have some hesitancy that her lack of experience going in might make this hard for her to get into. So I think it's an absolutely, and let's just, this, normally we save guild thoughts towards the end, but that was effectively Sylvain Lacroix's chief beef with the game. Praised the art, but thought that this would be have some issues there. Ultimately gave it a 3 on the Duke scale. We rate everything here at the Dukes of Dice on a 6-point scale. 1 being bad, 6 being good, 3 being game is okay, not exciting, we'll play in the right situation. So I have some fear about that because I think visually she'd be drawn in, and I think it plays short enough and has enough meat there that I think it would be a satisfying play, though she tends to enjoy more of a solitaire, puzzly type of experience if we're not going toe-to-toe in, say, cribbage, as an example, which has continued to be the staple, the mainstay, the default. I'm really tired, you're really tired, let's just play some cribbage and continue our series. By the way, 92 to 82 is the current cribbage score of games, just individual games, so far this year, just this year. So that's gotten a lot of play.
92-82 in whose favor?
92-82 in my favor.
Ah, okay.
Yep. So we play 3-game sets every time we play. It was a close one last night. It was feisty. That was a feisty series. Anyway, back to this game. So I think there's a lot to love in the design of this. The events are really interesting. There's that one event, Sean. I'm sure you use this to great effect in some play, where it costs 4 water. It starts as far back as an event can start, but when it triggers, it damages all 3 of your opponent's camps. Incredibly, incredibly powerful, but you have to save up the water to use it, and you want to set up a situation where the opponent's camps are damaged so that you wipe them off the board and don't have to worry about them getting restored. This happened in one of my plays where Patrick kept restoring stuff, just kept fixing the thing I kept breaking. And so I couldn't time it out to where I could deprive him of what was a key ability. And eventually he broke through my defenses, kind of coming the other direction. But there's that tug of war to this game. There's an openness to options, right? I can play this card and add it to this lane for extra protection, but it might get wiped off the board next turn, and maybe I really need the extra water right now, or I need to get a raid going, or I need something else from this card. The game always gives you something to do. You have too much water and don't know what to do with it, spend 2, draw a card, see what you get. You have an extra water at the end of your turn. Great, bank it in a water silo, and maybe you'll draw that incredible event and put the pressure on. You're able to see things coming and plan for it, because most cards don't come into play ready to roll, ready to go. So I have a chance to respond to the thing you're doing in most cases. It offers a lot of interesting possibilities in that vein, and then you have the abilities to junk cards. The system is elegant and flexible. It's the same shared deck, and you are able to use cards in so many different ways. I don't know. I really, really enjoyed this game, Sean. I think when you combine a lot of the features going on, the events, the multi-uses on the cards, how streamlined things can feel. I have one critique. I'll see if this resonates with you, Sean. Patrick requested that we draw our card not at the start of a turn, but at the end of a turn. So that because when you draw the card at the start of your turn, it might change your entire plan for that turn. It might open up new possibilities that don't allow you to plan as much in advance. So I might get extra access to extra water, or a card I want to play, or an event, or something that might change up my strategy. And my pushback on that was, well, what if there's a card in the deck that might affect cards in hand or some other element of planning? And what we determined was, at least based on current abilities in the set, there isn't anything that plays off of that, so that drawing a card at the end of a turn would actually be fine once a turn is fully over. Your thoughts on that, Sean?
What?
No. None of this clicked.
No. You get a card. Get a card at the beginning of the turn, and then it's either oh cool, there's something I can junk, or oh hey, that's the thing that I need, or great, this is an extra card that I can discard as part of a looting of, draw and discard, so I can keep these other cards but dig deep. I don't understand why that inclination's even there.
I'll tell you why. Because one card could potentially change your entire plan for a turn.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
so,
that's great. That's the great part of card games.
But if I have the time to draw it at the end of my turn when I can't do anything else with that card, that allows me to at least better understand my possibility space and might enable the game to play faster.
Oh, I didn't. Okay. I mean, I thought this was a pretty snappy game. I didn't think it needed to be streamlined or sped up in any way.
It's just taking out a piece of analysis to kind of make more efficient use of what you're doing on your opponent's turn. Because otherwise, this isn't a game where you have interrupts or things that can kind of get in the way of effects. I can't discard a card to block an effect. I can't jump in, pay water to do something off turn. So
yeah, I would also say that I think it effectively slows down the game by a turn in one sense.
What do you mean by that?
Because you don't have access. You have access to one fewer card
for the very first turn.
In effect, each subsequent turn, you're down a card every turn, essentially.
So here's how you could mitigate
your time.
that.
You're offsetting that time wise, but I don't know. It seems weird, and it's like, okay, yeah, go ahead.
You think it's solving a problem that isn't there?
Correct.
I think it just makes what's already a reasonably snappy game that much snappier if you have that time for analysis off turn. If you're able to fill that time and see what someone else is doing, and then be able to more efficiently respond to it when your turn comes, instead of drawing something that changes up the equation.
And I don't know if this is just sort of there are a lot of card games where you draw a card at the beginning of the turn. And so I don't know if it's, well, that's how most games do it. So, why would you differ from that? I don't know that maybe there was a time in design where they did something like that with this game. I don't know. But again, I just don't see the problem that this is necessarily fixing.
Okay. I experienced, I think, especially if you have an AP prone player, I think it's a way that you could potentially cut down on that analysis time.
Sure. But then I guess I would counter with, you get that card, and that card in turn one, being able to use it in turn one is very different than you've been able to use in turn two, because now you're still reacting to a whole different situation. It could be, there are certain cards that your opponent plays and they are kill on sight, right? Because they're part of a
Right.
combo.
Have to get them out of there.
They're just really strong. Or they do something, because there are some effects that say, damage one of your people or destroy one of your people. There's a destroy effect, which is basically, super kill something. And they've left a lane open because they got the strong effect by killing one of their people, but it left a camp open. And now you say, oh, well, okay, that changes everything. I mean, I felt like I was more responding to changes in what my opponent did than the new opportunities that were brought by drawing a new card every turn.
I think both are true. I think you would, at least in my mind, respond to both. My options at play in my hand and what the board state is, what's going on in my opponent's setup or what they've done to my setup in the interim between turns. If you're worried about having access to a card earlier, I think it's as simple as, because they already modify the rules for a first turn in the game. If you're a first player, you get 1 water.
Yeah, you get less water.
Right. I mean, make it as simple as, for the first turn of the game, draw the number of things on your cards plus 1. And then that takes away that criticism, at least.
Right. I feel like there's a certain dissatisfaction as a player by having to wait. So for example, let me tell you about some Magic design space. So back in Alliances, which was the set after Ice Age that came out in like 95, they had this new mechanic that it's an effect that you do the effect of the card, and then at the start of the next upkeep phase, you draw a card. So basically, I do something now on my turn. Awesome. I play that card, and then I pass the turn. It's your turn. It's the start of your turn, the upkeep phase. Then I get to draw a card. Magic has gotten rid of that. Magic, that effect is now you do something and you immediately draw a card, because there's a certain level of player dissatisfaction with having to wait. And I kind of feel like that's what that would do, where I draw my card at the end of the turn. I'm basically waiting to use it a whole nother turn.
Okay.
And there's less player enjoyment in having to wait. And there's
it's an interesting thought.
And it's also the heart of the cards from like Yu-Gi-Oh, right? Like, no, I mean, really, like there's this sort of drama of, oh man, like I really need a card that's going to give me a refresh, or I need a card that's going to give me something. And there's that excitement of drawing. And I feel like that excitement is dwindled if, well, I may never be able to use this card because I'm going to be dead before I can play it.
This point, Sean.
Yeah.
That is what's intriguing to me. That I think is the best counter to this, which is you want that exciting moment of I had that for one of my plays, Sean. I had that guy in play that allows you to play events to the 0 space, the first one you have each turn. And for 3 turns of keeping this guy alive, ready to go, whatever else, I could not draw an event.
Mm-hmm.
I tried milling through the deck. I tried adding extra draws. I tried junking cards for draws, and I didn't draw an event. And then the one turn he's gone is when I draw the event.
Yeah.
If I'd had that event finally at the end of a turn and then he gets wiped off the board, that would have been so rough. So I get it. I actually get it. That moment of surprise is important. Okay, fair enough. Broadly, this game is really cool. And I like that you have a variety of sacrifice effects, restore effects, global effects. Hey, if you play to this lane, it's 1 water cost less. Hey, if you use this camp's ability, card can come into play ready, use its ability, but be damaged. Really, did you use that camp, Sean, or did you run into that camp?
I did not.
That's a cool camp. It got used against me, and it was super frustrating.
Yeah.
Basically, you can bring a card into play, but and you can use its ability immediately that turn.
Normally you can't. I don't know that I explained that, but normally a card isn't ready the turn you bring it into play.
Right. So you can use its ability, paying the cost, but then the card is immediately damaged in the process. It was used to really good effect against me. And there are some cool combos just based in the camp deck.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I really liked it from that standpoint. Elegant, plays fast, and has a stalemate stopper baked into it. If you go through the
Yeah.
deck twice, the game is just over. It's a draw. Sorry, you should have pushed harder to finish off your opponent.
Yeah, I think that without that raid mechanic, this game would be very frustrating and drawn out. I think it's a great mechanic. So let's talk about theme. And Alex, I've picked out 6 cards.
Ooh, okay.
To discuss theme. Before theme, though, let me talk about setting. So I mean, it's not Mad Max, but it's heavily inspired, right? I'm pretty sure Daniel Pitchnick is from Australia, I believe. I'm here at his website. Let's see. In April 2014, I won the Australian Scrabble Championships. Oh, yeah, so Australian. And the Magic the Gathering stuff, let's see. He placed 3rd in the 2005 National Championships and represented Australia at the 2005 World Championships in Paris. He also qualified for and played in Pro Tour Los Angeles and Pro Tour Kuala Lumpur. I watched most of the coverage from Pro Tour Kuala Lumpur. There was like a lot of coverage. Anyway, so Mad Max, takes place in Australia. And Alex, you've seen none of the Mad Max movies, right?
None of them.
None of them. Not even the new one, Fury Road.
No, which I've heard is amazing.
It's incredible. It is so incredible. Oh man. Oh, it's so good. Yeah, growing up, I'd only seen Beyond Thunderdome, which was like just on TV all the time, it seemed like. And maybe bits and pieces of the original Mad Max, but I watched them all as an adult. And man, I love Fury Road. If nothing else, you need to watch Fury Road. It's incredible. Yeah, it's super awesome. But do you enjoy the post-apocalyptic setting? Is that something you gravitate towards in consuming fiction and media and things like that?
So I've been watching with Abby a show that explores this that's amazing so far. Have not seen the full season. Station 11. Have you heard of this show, Sean?
I don't think I have.
Oh, Sean. A quick diversion here for Station 11. I'm going to do my best to avoid any kind of spoiler. I won't even discuss it. But it dives into a post-apocalyptic world in a really interesting way. I think when done well, it's an interesting thematic space to play off of. You kind of get remnants of the old world. I don't know, desperate fight for resources. Yeah, I think it's a theme that I would tend to like more than not.
Survivors of a devastating flu attempt to rebuild and reimagine the world anew while holding on to the best.
You are listening to the Dukes of Dice,
that's on HBO
proud
Max.
members of the Dice Tower
HBO Max.
Network.
And
for other great
would
shows in
recommend,
the
I'm not
network,
through the
check
full
out
first season. There are pieces of
DicetowerNetwork.com.
this that don't make a ton
Back
of
to
sense,
Alex and Sean
but I
for
think
this
it
week's
explores
Dukes
that
Double
space
Take.
in a really cool way. I'll throw out there too, Sean. It is, for me, this didn't affect Abby, but for me it's a tough watch because it is so centered around a pandemic. It made it a trickier, I don't know, it hit me harder. It hit me in kind of a weird way. I got past it. It's a really good show. But just know if that's something that sounds like I need fiction for escapism right now, and that is too much not an escape.
Sure.
It may hit you in a weird way, but I think it does pay off and it does some really cool things with that concept. So I don't know. I'll leave it there. I don't want to dive any further in. But that's Station 11. And yes, I have been enjoying that as a theme of late. Okay,
cool. Yeah, I like post-apocalyptic. I mean, I think there's just sort of this morbid curiosity. And you tend to think, oh yeah, in that kind of setting, here's what I'd do. And really at that point, my skills as a lawyer would be completely useless. And it's people with actual like skills with working with their hands that matter. And I'm like, well, if it helps before the enemy raid, I can draft up a memorandum and we could see, no. But anyway, yeah, let me talk about a couple cards. I just picked out 6 that I thought were interesting to demonstrate the theme and thematic connection and connection between mechanic and theme. So 2 events. First, one event is Radiation, and it comes in at the first event level, and it just says damage all people. all people. It's a picture of a Geiger counter. And basically, so it doesn't care if it's unprotected, doesn't care if it's yours or your opponent's. It's just do a damage to every person in play. There's famine. Oof. This one is rough. This one is this skinny, malnourished mother carrying a baby and then holding a hand of a toddler, and they've all got masks and goggles on. I guess masks aren't that weird nowadays. But each player, starting with you, destroys, not damages, destroys all but one of their people. Oof. Did you have that played on you, or did you play that?
No, it didn't come into play in our games, but I saw the card, and I think I used it. It has a junk effect for water or damage? Damage. Okay.
Damage a person.
Yeah, that was how it got used.
Yeah. No, interesting. So, and then some people. So there's the wounded soldier, and only costs one water, and then he has an ability where he can pay a water to damage something. And then it says when this card enters play, draw a card, but then damage this card. So it's almost like you're getting the benefit of his knowledge as a soldier, but he's wounded, so he comes in wounded. Hey, that makes sense. Sniper, the sniper has an ability, pay 2 water, damage any card. So whenever the any word comes up, you basically ignore protection, and that makes sense with a sniper. You have a looter. A looter has an ability, pay 2 water, damage. If this hits a camp, draw a card. You're looting. That makes sense. And then the last one I'll point out is the Doomsayer, which is probably one of my favorite cards. The art is really cool. I don't know if you remember this one. I'll hold it up. There
yes. Yep. Absolutely.
This hooded guy, shirtless. He has these glowing blue eyes. All these sort of tribal tattoos on him. Really cool. Really menacing looking. And so 2 things. First, when this card comes into play, this Doomsayer, you move all of the opponent's events back 1 space. You've delayed all of their events. And I'll tell you, I've played it where there were 2 events, and that's devastating by itself, right? If there were well, I guess it wouldn't work with 3. Does it work with 3? Can you move past? I don't know.
That's an interesting question. I actually don't know what that corner case would be. We're looking up. It might be addressed in the FAQ.
Yeah, there's a pretty solid FAQ and list of the different cards that might tell you about that. But that's devastating, right? Because that player is sort of planning on these things happening. They typically just happen as far as the mechanics of the game are concerned. But then also it has an ability, once it's in play, 1 water, and I don't know what word that I just said was. If an opponent has an event in play, you can damage something. And that's a pretty cheap damage effect. Usually 1 water for 1 damage is pretty cheap, and there's usually some sort of condition on it. So yeah, I like that. I like that it's this Doomsayer. There's these impending events that make him better, basically. So
Sean, from the FAQ.
Yes.
If there's no room to move an event back, it does not move.
Perfect. Great. So yeah, ideally when they've got 2 events, and that again, that's pretty big. So yeah, I think there's a strong thematic connection between the mechanics and the art and the theme and all of that. So I think it's a really good game, Alex. And let's read. Or did you have anything to say on theme? Sorry.
No, I'm right there with you. I think the theme ties into what you're doing. It feels like you're in this back and forth fight. It's a brutal setting because you're often sacrificing people for the greater good or for some sort of purpose, and a lot of the camp abilities will play off of that. It feels very thematic and very satisfying from that standpoint. We can skip guild thoughts. We already kind of talked through Sylvain's thoughts.
Well, except that I want to talk about his kind of criticism here at the end, because it did trigger something for me, and also Chris had said this too. I really wanted, this is Sylvain Lacroix, I really wanted to appreciate the game, but in the end, it fell a bit flat for me. It reminded me a bit of a simpler Pixel Tactics. The game is fun, but can be pretty swingy. To get the most of this game, you need to have a dedicated player that will play with you. Otherwise, the game really favors the player with the most experience. And when when I sat down with Chris to play my first couple games, he was like, "Oh, this kind of looks like Pixel Tactics in the way it's set up." I mean, obviously not visually. Pixel Tactics is, 16-bit art and I mean, very different looking game, but as far as the way it sets up and the lanes, things like that. Um, so yeah, I think I'm also comparing this to Pixel Tactics. Pixel Tactics from level 99. Basically, you have lanes, and I believe in Pixel Tactics, your left lane corresponds to my right lane, but also there are you have 3 levels, and then you have your leader in the back, and every card is different based on which whether it's in row 1, row 2, row 3, or if it's your leader. And does different things. There are ranged abilities. So this is, I think Sylvain's right. I think this is kind of a simpler Pixel Tactics, which is in and of itself not a bad thing at all. So I don't know. You'd played Pixel Tactics, what, twice maybe?
Yeah, once or twice. I had it as a whole set. I liked Pixel Tactics, but found it to some extent overwhelming on initial plays. So I think I can see the similarities, especially when it comes to the spatial nature of the game. But I would play this over Pixel Tactics any day.
Sure. Yeah, and I would expect that. And I think I would prefer to play Pixel Tactics over this. Even though I think the art style is more in line with my preferences. That's one thing with level 99. Their art design has never been my cup of tea. But a lot of their games are amazing. But yeah, I this game is really good and it's really interesting. And I really enjoy that initial decision of, okay, what are the camps I'm going to put together? And then how am I going to best synergize these and make a plan and execute a plan? And I think it's really solid. I just don't know how often I'm going to come back to this game. Especially when I look at Pixel Tactics, and I'm not coming back to that game all that often either. I also have a bunch of sets. I love it. I enjoy it every time I play it, but it's also, I think Pixel Tactics also falls in that needing a dedicated player too. And I think that's the hard part with a lot of these games, right? Like I could sit down and I can teach this game to anyone. You'll pick it up pretty quick. But I may have to hold back a little bit in that initial play or initial couple plays just so it's not overwhelming. I mean, there was one game of the first game with Raquel where it was like I destroyed her. Like I just destroyed her, and I think it affected her view of the game. Like she played again, but she was not thrilled about it. And it was a closer game in the second game, but that first game was so bad that it just was bad for the overall experience, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Again, I'm worried about this with introducing Abby to this game, but I think overall it's hard for me to discount a lot of other things this game has going for it. So to that end, final thoughts. Sean, I'll go first because I think this is it's more of a dilemma for you than it is for me.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll talk about in our next segment about a game where I mentioned you had a falling version of a score, a game that you were giving a score at one end that was likely to drop a year from now. I'm giving this game on our 6-point scale a 5. A great game will rarely turn out a play of it. I think between the art, how smooth the mechanics are, the really interesting decisions up at the front end of this game, so everything from the look to the feel to the play, this game is awesome. I love how the events play into it. I love the interesting spaces that the game allows for. It's well laid out. It's spatial. It's thematic. It does so many things right. And some of those questions about who am I going to play it with, how many times, are the really the main thing holding me back from going up to a 6, an all-time favorite that's a contender for the top 10. I think this game is not just great, but phenomenal. And it's just a matter of how often is it going to get played. If Abby really gloms onto this and this becomes something that's part of our rotation, and a good chance this rises to a 6. It's also possible that it'll just kind of sit on the shelf and look pretty.
Yeah.
And even then, it'll be a 5 for me. So I'd say a 5 that's not going to go lower than a 5 a year from now, but might go higher.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's where I am.
And that's exactly what I expected you to say. As I was playing this before you and I had talked about this game, I was like, Alex is going to really dig this game. So yeah. All right. Well, you're right. There is a dilemma here. I'm giving this either a 3 or a 4. So let's talk this through. 3, game is okay, not exciting, will play in the right situation. 4, a good game, worth playing, just not all the time, belongs in the duchy. So 3, game is okay. I don't think it's just okay. I don't. I think it is exciting. To say that it's not exciting, I don't think that's true. Will play in the right situation. Well, that does fit though. So I've got some of the criteria of a 3 there, but not the important ones. 4, a good game. Yeah, I think it's a good game. I think it is worth playing. Just not all the time. Does it belong in the duchy? I mean, that's the question is, do I want to keep this game? Do I want to have access to it? And I don't know that I do. So that's the problem. I mean, maybe this is going to be the Alma Mater situation again, which you alluded to, and we'll discuss in more detail in a second. I think I'm going to give it a 4. A good game, worth playing, just not all the time, belongs in the duchy, but it is teetering on the edge of me wanting to give it a 3. I think for most people should give this game a shot and play it. I think most people, more people will appreciate it than not. But for whatever reason, I just don't know how quick I am to want to get this back to the table, or how quickly I'll think of this as, a 2-player game. But for now, I'll give it a 4, but we'll see at the double take.
Man, I feel like that's selling this game short so much in terms of how good it is. But I also get it's based on whether you're going to play it, and our reviews, our scores are based on how this game fits into our lives, and not always an objective measure of a game's quality.
Yeah, like I said, I think it's a really good game. Yeah.
All right. Well, that'll do it for the Duke's review of Radlands. A 5 with the possibility of rising to a 6 for me, and a 4 with the possibility of falling to a 3 for Sean.
You are listening to the Dukes of Dice, proud members of the Dice Tower Network. For other great shows in the network, check out Dicetowernetwork.com. Back to Alex and Sean for this week's Dukes Double Take.
Next up, our Duke's Double Take. We're looking back at episode 244, The Bar Exam, where we reviewed Alma Mater. Sean, I gave this one a listen. You gave this one a 4. You really wobbled back and forth as you were talking about this. At one point, you gave it a solid high 3, and then you kind of flipped at the last moment to a 4. You said the game was good, but you found it bland. You'd be willing to play another game or two, but maybe that's it. You thought that this game would kind of wear out its welcome. And I said in this moment, this is an exact quote, you have a built-in double take 3 here. I said that on the double take, this would end up at a 3. We'll see if that's true or not, but that's what I alleged. I gave this game a 2. I said this was a game that was a pain to learn, a pain to set up, and just overall not fun. I saw the merit. It wasn't for me. I didn't want anything else to do with it. So that was where I ended up falling on Alma Mater. I think the more of the curiosity, Sean, because I haven't played it, I have no additional thoughts since. The Guild had no thoughts on this, which I think is indicative. Have you played this game since, and what has happened to your score?
There were actually 2 thoughts on Alma Mater from the Guild.
What?
Yeah. So I have not played it since. And frankly, I've forgotten a lot about this game. And so, yeah, I mean, I'll go ahead and drop it to a 3. Let me read BJ's comment here. He says, I bought Alma Mater with high expectations since I love so many other of the Italian design group's offerings. Sadly, our plays of Alma Mater were as dry as a first-year large lecture only course at university. I'd play it again, I guess, if Sean and Alex really wanted to, but I'd prefer to play Coimbra or Grand Austria Hotel. Absolutely, BJ. I'll give it a so weighed down by student loans that we can't afford to kickstart any games for a while 3, but dangerously close to a 2.
There's also another thought, but I don't know if that's a thought on the game. I don't know. You can read that one too if you want, Sean, because I clearly read over it.
Well, it's just Harry Zafriadis. I hope that's close. Basically saying it's been in his collection, but he hasn't had a chance to play it yet because of COVID concerns. So 1.5 comments.
Yeah. So okay. My apologies, BJ. I have snubbed you, but yeah. Okay. Yeah. Haven't thought about it. You would drop it to a 3. I think that's sounds about right and what I predicted. And I feel vindicated, Sean. I feel vindicated.
Okay. I mean, you got to do what you got to do, Alex. I'm happy for you.
Small victories. Well, much like you forgot about this game, I don't think we need to spend much more time on it. That's a Duke's double take on Alma Mater. Stays at a 2 for me and goes from a low 4 to a 3 for Sean. Before we wrap things up, the best of the rest, the names we did not pick, but could have. And Sean, a strong week for names this week, especially one-word titles.
Yeah, this is back-to-back episodes where we have some really, really strong suggestions here.
Yeah. Jimmy DM90 with the only one on this list that isn't a one-word title, Mad Diplomax, referring to Mad Max and referring to the diplomas in Alma Mater. Mad Diplomax. This was a contender for you, Sean.
Yeah, definitely. And then Baker Mitchell suggested Motorboard, which is the name of the little flat hat that graduates wear, and of course in a wait, what?
The mortarboard is
mortarboard. Oh my God, mortarboard. Yeah, I'm like. Yeah, I know. It's yeah.
Sean, you need some coffee, man.
Okay, so a mortar board is the hat, is the graduation hat with the tassel, but the title suggestion is motor board, like an engine motor, which. Although I'm trying to remember, was Radlands really like vehicle focused?
It's got some vehicles in it. Your raid card is a vehicle.
Yeah, that's true. It's not as vehicle focused as, say, Fury Road, which is basically the entire movie is essentially them chasing each other in vehicles. Like, it's, oh, God, so good. Anyway, yes, Baker Mitchell, very good. Motorboard.
BJ from Board Game Gumbo suggested Tussles, mixing in tassels, referring to kind of graduation tassels, and the tussles of a battle in this game. So, really clever, nice combination of things.
And then Steve O'Rourke, the name father, suggested a terrible name, as far as Alex would have you believe it.
Wait.
Gradlands. So combining Radlands with graduates from Alma Mater, or graduate course study, Gradlands. Alex said, and I quote, "Well, it has the name of one of the games in it, and I don't care for that."
The entire full name of the game in it.
Oh, terrible. Who would ever think to do that?
Whatever. Anyway, Justin Jacobson of Restoration Games fame, with which, by the way, they just wrapped up a Kickstarter on a post-apocalyptic racing game.
Yeah.
So, U-238, referring to uranium, so kind of a radioactive material, but then the U in university for U-238. There you go.
Yeah, very good. Great. Again, back-to-back episodes where we had very strong, solid name suggestions that made it difficult for Alex and I to decide. So good job, Guild, as always. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for the episode then, Alex. This has been episode 269. Again, I feel like I'm saying episode a lot, but that's fine. Thanks again.
You're having an episode.
Thanks again to... Nice. That was good. Thanks again to Harry Zafariadis for Thunderdorm. Until next time, this is Sean.
And Alex.
And Duke you later, everybody.
Thank you so much for listening to the Dukes of Dice. Today's episode was recorded in the Duchy on February 26th, 2022. Our theme music provided by Carbohydro M from his Prime Legacy album. The Dukes of Dice are a proud member of the Dice Tower Network. For other great board gaming podcasts, check out Dicetowernetwork.com. And for all the latest in the Duchy, go to DukesOfDice.com. Find us on Twitter at Dukes of Dice. Join in conversations on our Board Game Geek Guild. Find us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks to our sponsor, Game Toppers LLC. You can learn more about Game Toppers on their website, GameToppersLLC.com. Remember, if it's not a showstopper, it's not a game topper. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks. Until then, game on.